Thank you, Marty. Um, I am the Solano County Coordinator for the Center for Common Ground. I became the coordinator because there was no one here to do it, and quite by accident. During the summer of last year, my synagogue in San Francisco began working with the Reclaim Our Vote campaign, which is a campaign run by the Center for Common Ground. I was so impressed with what I saw that I sent them an email asking if there was anyone in Solano County who was volunteering for them. A woman by the name of Nancy Goodben answered my email within a few hours of me sending it. Those of you who live in Solano County may recognize her last name, as I did. As it turns out, Nadine Goodben, who is her stepmother, lives in the area. I'm not sure if Nadine is here with us today, but Nancy is here. So thank you, Nancy, for being here. Nancy and I met on Zoom and I became the coordinator. Nancy is a super volunteer with Center for Common Ground. All of those weekly emails I sent out from Reclaim Our Vote were actually written by her. I copied and pasted with her permission, of course. Now the truth comes out. Nancy is responsible in large part for all of the messaging, all of the content that comes from the Center for Common Ground. So thank you, Nancy. After the election, I thought I was done volunteering. Then the Capitol riot occurred. Then I saw that 165 voter suppression bills have been introduced into various state legislatures across the United States. I saw that I was not done, and we are not done. I decided that we needed Andrea Miller to come and tell us what we need to do next. I am going to give you the official bio of Andrea and then the unofficial one. So first, here's the official one. Andrea Miller is the founding board member and digital strategist for the Center for Common Ground, a 501c3 organization based in Virginia. And she's also the executive director of People Demanding Action, a multi-issue advocacy group with more than 400,000 members. Andrea is also an IT specialist, as we've already found out, and a former adjunct professor of IT at Johns Hopkins University and Howard University. Andrea was the Democratic nominee in 2008 for the House of Representatives in Virginia's 4th District and worked for both Move On and the Dennis Kucinich campaign. During the 2017 and 2018 elections, during what became known as the Reclaim Our Vote campaign, she designed and deployed virtual phone banks for outreach to underrepresented voters in Virginia, Alabama, Pennsylvania, Texas, and other states with a history of voter suppression. In 2020, that work expanded to include postcards, texting, and canvassing to more than 13 million community of color voters. Now for the unofficial biography, and on a personal note, Andrea was the strategist for the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. It was her vision to reach out to voters, unregistered and registered, in rural areas of the southern states. She obtained lists of deregistered voters and mobilized volunteers to contact them. She wrote the scripts that were sent out on the postcards and determined where to send them. And it was her vision to form coalitions with diverse groups. And by doing so, we gained thousands of volunteers who then worked together for the same cause. She gave us a plan to go forward and hope on the days when the news was so discouraging. I am really proud and pleased to welcome Andrea Miller here today. Thank you. Andrea, it's all yours.
Thank you so very much, Jerry, for that very warm and very lovely introduction. It's always so strange when I'm hearing people talk about me and I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds like a really interesting person. And I'm like, oh, darn, that's me. Darn, I already know her. So it's fun. Anyway, thank you. I spent a good deal of, well, the early part of my life around elections because I'm originally from Chicago. Now, I do consider myself Virginian, but I'm originally from Chicago and I grew up with elections because I had two uncles in the daily machine. So I know my way around elections. So one of the things I noticed when I was looking in 2015 at what happened in a lot of states and my own state of Virginia was I realized that the political parties had moved away from really reaching out to community of color voters. Candidates didn't reach out, political parties didn't reach out, because in so many communities, especially if they were rural, these voters, A, didn't really vote very often, and B, they weren't donors. So when I was looking and analyzing all these southern state election losses, it was like, well, there's all these voters that are out there that still have the ability to vote. And if we could get them interested in voting again, whoever they wanted to vote for, this would basically really begin to revive democracy, because democracy only works when everybody has the ability to participate and everybody is encouraged to participate. So I want to just give you a high level, detailed overview of what Reclaim Our Vote did in 2020. And now this is going to include the Georgia runoff. In 2020, we sent 9.6 million postcards to voters. We postcarded the entire state of North Carolina, all the community of color voters. We postcarded all the community of color voters in the great state of Georgia. We made 1.9 million phone calls to voters. In the Georgia primary, which was in June of 2020, we found that out of 75,000 phone calls that we made to the rural Georgia Black Belt, 57,000 people actually showed up to vote. And out of those 57,000 voters that showed up, 25,000 of them were brand new voters, meaning they had never voted before. So we have always cared very much about making sure that our older voters, our rural voters, our poor voters would be able to cast a ballot. And unfortunately, in 2020, in the 21st century, it's actually getting harder. So many people have the internet, and we depend on the internet, and we forget people who don't have the internet. This can cause them a huge problem in being able to cast their ballot. So one of the things that we do, if you've ever done postcarding for us, or if you have ever been part of our phone banks, is the amount of information we provide to our voters. And when we are phone banking, we always leave messages. And what that has done is we found that it really doesn't make a difference whether we spoke to the voter or whether all we did was leave them a message, that we get the exact same percentage of voter turnout as we got when we actually spoke to the voter. So we are going to continue to do this. Now, Virginia is one of those odd states where our statewide elections and our state house elections are in odd numbered years. So that means Virginia has an election every year. So we're getting ready to get started in Virginia with some postcarding for unregistered voters, and then the Virginia primary is in June. I'm going to immediately pivot and sort of draw a contrast, sort of a tale of two legislatures, if you will. So Virginia and Georgia are two state legislatures in Arizona that are currently in session now. Virginia in the 2021 session passed Sunday voting, We are legally removing the requirements for a witness signature on vote by mail ballots. We have created a voters' bill of rights, and we have also requiring that all counties offer drop boxes. In 2020, drop boxes were optional. Now they are mandatory, and we will be implementing same-day registration this year. I'm going to go share my screen, and I'm going to walk you through a PowerPoint. As I said, we're going to look at a tale of different legislatures. What you're looking at and what I'm going to be walking through is the Georgia GOP Election Confidence Task Force report. Now, we know that they have circulated this to the GOP in all the states, because when I read the Georgia report, there were a couple of places where they forgot to remove Iowa and replace it with Georgia. So I just described what legislation we passed this year in Virginia to make voting easier. This is the report of the Election Confidence Task Force. They want to curtail vote by mail. So almost every state has introduced a bill that does that. Georgia has had vote by mail since 2005. Georgia introduced no less than 6 pieces of legislation that would end no excuse absentee voting. They want to end automatic voter registration at the DMV, forcing people to opt in to be registered to vote or have their voter registration updated, rather than the way it is now in most states. You have to opt out and say, no, don't send my information in. They want to be able to purge voters 60 days before an election. Federal law basically says you can't purge voters after 90 days. So, in other words, you've got to give voters time to figure out they've been removed from the rolls, be notified, and then give voters an opportunity to get back on the rolls. Since no southern state, well, North Carolina kind of has it, most southern states do not offer same day voter registration. And they also are suggesting give counties control of the voter purge list. A number of southern states, it is the state that controls the voter purge list. Well, they've decided that in Georgia, maybe the state has gotten kind of soft, and they've got some really hardcore counties that would really go in for this voter purge stuff. So they want to allow counties to control the purge of voters. They are going to compare every registered voter to a list of felons. In most southern states, if you have a felony conviction, your ability to vote could be severely curtailed or limited. Georgia has a rule about voters that have been convicted of crimes of moral turpitude are not able to register and vote. With moral turpitude, kind of really listing crimes that more community of color people are likely to commit. They are going to require a witness signature on each absentee ballot envelope. And they want people to send in their driver's license or a photo ID when they submit an absentee ballot application. One of the bills that's currently being considered right now wants the ID sent when you request the ballot application, and then another one sent when you actually turn the ballot in. And They had a concept about drop boxes, either eliminate them entirely or only have drop boxes at early voting sites during the hours when early voting is open. They want to make sure that at the drop boxes, they can scan photo ID and print a receipt. And the bill that was introduced actually requires security, potentially law enforcement, at the drop box. So that basically says, well, then why bother with drop boxes? Just make people early vote. They want to eliminate third parties sending absentee ballot applications, and there would be a $10,000 fine for any group that did that. They want to eliminate third-party absentee ballot curing. And a number of people on this call may have worked on ballot curing in one of the states. They also want to prohibit people getting food and beverages while they're waiting in these 2, 3, 4, and 5 hour lines. And they want to reinstate interstate cross check. And only political parties can have credentialed observers when looking at while they are conducting elections and doing the vote count. All of these bills have been introduced. Originally, they were introduced as individual bills. And then last week, we saw the omnibus bills show up. We saw HB 531 that basically did all of the above, everything that I've just walked you through. And then we also saw SB 241. 241 brings back cross check, and it also says if people that are currently at the local elections office are not going to do the job that they are requiring to clean up and purge the voter list, then the Secretary of State can take over those local election offices. All right, what I'm going to do now is that's the problem. And we're looking at 165 bills introduced in 33 states. I don't know if anybody has friends in Washington state, but in Washington state, most of the state actually votes by mail. Someone in Washington state introduced a bill to end vote by mail and require that people go back to voting in person. In Arizona, they introduced a bill that would prohibit same day registration. So now let's look at what the solution is. So we've done the problem. I don't want you to all lose hope. Let me go get the solution. Here's the solution. Many of you hopefully have heard of the For the People Act. And a lot of times people will say HR1/S1. In other words, the first bill introduced in the House of Representatives. And then while S1 has not been introduced in the Senate yet, they have reserved the number saying this is of utmost priority for us to pass this bill. Now, this is the voting rights section of what the For the People Act does. It actually has three parts. Part one is voting rights. Part two is dealing with gerrymandering. And part three is dealing with ethics and campaign finance reform. I'm going to be focusing on the voting rights. Now, all states will have no excuse early voting. Alabama and South Carolina only got early voting because of COVID. Mississippi and a number of other states do not have early voting. All states will have a minimum of 15 days early voting. Virginia just got early voting for the first time in 2020. All states will have no excuse to vote by mail. So that means all these laws that they are introducing, even if they pass them in many of these states, and they will, because many of these states, Georgia, Arizona, when you look at their legislature, they're trifectas. Republican governor, Republican legislature, these bills will pass. They will and could very well be signed into law. All states will have same day voter registration so that if you haven't voted in a while and you show up to vote and you discover, what do you mean I'm no longer registered? Right then, right there, when you showed up to vote, you will be able to do something about it. All states will have online voter registration. Mississippi does not have online voter registration. North Carolina just got online voter registration last year. All states will have automatic voter registration for voters who will be 18 by election day. And the voter is going to have to opt out rather than opting in. And election day becomes a federal holiday. That's not all. We're just starting to get to the good stuff. The For the People Act also contains the Democracy Restoration Act. I had the privilege of working with Congressman John Conyers about 10 years ago on the Democracy Restoration Act. There are still 4 states, Virginia, Florida, Iowa, and Kentucky, that are lifetime felony disenfranchisement states, so that if you are convicted of a felony, you lose your ability to vote for a lifetime unless individually restored by the governor. Virginia passed a constitutional amendment this year that says, no, that's going to end. When you're released from prison, in your release packet will be a voter registration form. Florida did a referendum in 2019 where 63% of Florida voters said, we think when people get out of prison, they should be able to vote. The Florida legislature then immediately turned around and said, whoa, not so fast. We are only willing to let people vote again once they have paid their fines and fees, and then immediately refused to tell people what their fines and fees were. And that law change impacted 1.5 million people in Florida. And when they said your fines and fees have to be paid, that rendered 800,000 of the 1.5 million suddenly not able to be able to register to vote. Right now, there are probably about 5.2 million people in a variety of states who cannot vote because of a past felony conviction. Now, the rights are going to be restored. There will be no requirement to pay fines and penalties. There will also be no waiting period. Many of the states had a 3, 4, 5, 10-year waiting period. It depended on the type of felony. And so all that has gone away. When you are released from prison, you will get a voter registration form and you can immediately begin participating in democracy. Now, they also made some changes to early voting. There have to be at least 15 days of early voting, and early voting, there must be at least 10 hours of early voting each day. And they also say the early voting hours must be consistent. When we built our texting program and we were texting people their closest early voting location, not only did we have to text them the name and the address of the location, but we had to give them the dates that it was open and the times that it was open. Because in many of the large counties, we would have 4, 5 different dates when these centers were coming open and when they were closing, and a host of different times. This says, no, you're going to give people a consistent time so that they know when voting is going to be available. Vote by mail is going to have to be available to all voters. The state will not require that you provide any identifying information in order to get a ballot. You may not require a witness signature or that the ballot be notarized. And there will be no limit on the number of ballots a person may drop off or who drops off the ballots. Many of these states are saying that the only people who can drop off a ballot have to be a direct blood relative, or we have to have a signature from the voter authorizing this person to drop off their ballot. And so HR 1S1 says, nope, we're not doing all that. And so that is the main thing. Redistricting is part of voting, that there will either be a nonpartisan independent redistricting commission or there will be a 3-judge court. So I'm going to end right there and open it up for questions. Is it possible that someone can accidentally register in 2 states? What's wrong with checking other states' voter registration? Number one, the Trump family, they are registered to vote in at least 3 states, and nobody seems to be worried about them. The problem is the way they check. When they developed interstate cross-check, they looked at first name and last name. What are the odds that 2 people might have the same name when you look across 22 states? What are the odds? Well, turned out the odds were pretty damn high. And so what they would do is they would deregister voters in both states. So if they were realistically doing this, looking at name, looking at birth date, looking at suffix, I am John Washington. My son is John Washington. I'm senior, he's junior. I was born in 1958. He was born in 1972. We are obviously not the same person. So there really is no need. One of the things that those of us who do voting rights say, it's hard enough to get people to vote once. How are we going to get them to go and vote in another state? That doesn't even make sense. And then, in order to change the results of an election, we would be talking about hundreds of people doing this. Here is the procedure when you register to vote. When you register to vote and you have moved from another state, there is a question on that form. Are you registered to vote in another state? Yes, I was registered to vote before I moved to Virginia in Maryland. What Virginia did was Virginia checked Maryland. Yes, I'm registered. They had Maryland unregister me because I was now registered in Virginia. They don't need to say, oh, we're going to sit here and compare voter registration list looking only at names. The devil is in the detail. And no one is going to accidentally be voting in 2 states. All right, let's say, yes. And then the other problem we discovered is the purge rate was much higher among people who had Black and or Hispanic or community of color sounding surnames. than there were among Smith, Jones, and typical Anglo-Saxon names. Let's see. And then is S1, HR1, all these items? Yes. HR1 is an all or nothing at all bill. It is what we call an omnibus bill, meaning it's actually a compilation of about 50 different best of breed pieces of voting rights legislation that we cobbled all together in one big bill, saying, because this is going to take a Herculean effort to pass any of this, we might as well put it all together and pass it all at once. There are currently 221 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. That is every Democratic member of Congress. It is 218 votes in order to pass a bill in the House of Representatives. HR1 passed in the House of Representatives in the 116th Congress. Life gets interesting when we go to the Senate, because the Senate has a little thing known as the filibuster, which would require 60 votes to pass most pieces of legislation, unless it is purely a budgetary item and they can do it by budget reconciliation. So it's going to be interesting what we see in the Senate, whether there is a strong move to completely eliminate the filibuster, or whether we see them say, we will eliminate the filibuster for democracy issues, meaning HR1S1 for the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and probably DC statehood, which is really a democracy voting rights issue.
Andrea, while people are putting their questions in the chat, we actually have a few questions that people prepared in advance. So
okay.
So I'm going to have some people ask you the questions, and other people can still put their questions in the chat, and Andrea will get to them. So first, I want to introduce Carolyn, who wanted to ask a question. So Carolyn.
How did people respond when they received the postcards and phone calls that we all sent in?
Well, when we look at the rural area, and I'm going to use Georgia because Georgia was like the last race on this Senate race. When we were working in Georgia, and we really didn't work in Atlanta, there were 30 groups in Atlanta. So we made it a point of going sort of south, and well, not so much south, but we made it a point of going to the Georgia Black Belt. One of the things that we found was the fewest number of ballots that needed to be cured were really coming out of those rural counties. And normally you would expect the biggest problem with vote by mail, since there was no experience using it before among community of color voters, would be that we would have the greatest problem in the rural Black Belt. We actually had the least amount of problem in the rural Black Belt, because when people made the phone calls and they asked voters, what's your voting plan? How are you planning on voting? Are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to early vote? Are you going to vote on election day? People who said they were going to vote by mail, we could tell them, did your ballot get there? And then as time moved on, we could say, you're a little bit late. You may want to consider early voting. And people really like our phone calls. The other reason we stayed out of Atlanta was we knew everybody and their brother was calling Atlanta, and people were like, the phone would ring and they're like, oh, good Lord, it's another election call. But when we went down to the Georgia Black Belt, they weren't getting a lot of calls.
Thank you, Stacey Abrams.
Pardon?
Thank you, Stacey Abrams. That's what
well,
Okay.
and there's a lot of groups in Atlanta, but Georgia is not Atlanta, and Atlanta is not Georgia. Georgia, like all the other southern states, you've got your big cities, and then you've got the rural areas. for far too long, too many organizations have ignored the rural areas, which is why in 9 short years, we entirely lost the entire South. People got lazy and only wanted to work the big cities.
Okay, next question will come from Marty.
How do you counter voter discouragement? For example, the feeling that it isn't worth casting a vote. What arguments do you use to convince people to vote, and what media techniques do you use?
We use billboards is our only media technique, and we use billboards because billboards are up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Television advertising is a total waste of time and money, because invariably when an ad comes on television, that's when people get up to get a drink or go to the bathroom. In Virginia, because we lost control of the Virginia House in 2017 by 1 vote, we are really, really, really strong on that argument. Well, your vote doesn't matter. In Virginia, we lost control of the Virginia House with 1 vote. Would you have been that 1 vote? Every vote matters. Some of these elections are going to be very close. You have the ability to vote. If you want to keep that ability, you better go out and start using it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and thank you, Kimberly, for the last question, and then we'll open it, then we'll answer some of the other questions that are in the chat.
Go ahead. I'm ready.
Kim, are you there?
Kimberly, unmute yourself, please.
I'm trying. Thanks.
There you
Elaine.
are.
Andrea, we've got the HR one that's so important in the Senate, and then we've got 2022 midterm elections. Do we need to be doing something now about
Yes,
these things?
yes, we better be doing something now. Otherwise, we are not going to win in 2022. One of the things that we're creating are democracy centers where we are going in state with local people to help people really be able to focus on their local issues. One of the big problems that is occurring in many states, not just the South, but specifically in the South, is you're getting voters who are tired of being played. Nobody cares anything at all about their issues until it's about 5 months before the election. And then everybody and their brother is down there trying to get them to vote. And we really started paying attention to what we were hearing in Alabama, or at least I did. When we worked in Alabama in 2017 and got people to turn out and vote, a number of people told us they weren't going to vote. And they said they were sick and tired of being sick and tired. They said, I voted for a Republican and there's sewage in my backyard. I voted for a Democrat and there's still sewage in my backyard. I'll tell you what, whoever gets the sewage out of my backyard, well, that's when I'm going to start voting again. So the whole idea behind democracy centers is helping people understand what they can do about the local issues that are probably nonpartisan. It might be at the city council level or the district attorney level where political parties, especially the Democratic ones, really choose not to get involved and the citizens are left on their own. We had organizations where groups came down there, they asked them to text for them, and they said, if you text for us when the election is over, we'll leave you the names. Groups were like, oh, okay, great, yeah. And they went out and they bought texting programs because they knew they were going to get these names when the election was over. Well, the elections are over. The group's like, bye, it was real. But you said we were going to be able to get the names so that we could work on our own local issues. And they were like, what? Thank you. It was real. Things like that discourage the local organizations on the ground. They build distrust. And they really do make people think not only does their vote not matter, but they don't matter to the rest of the country and they are simply being played. So we are stepping in with the absolute opposite message and the absolute opposite behavior. So when I bought names to text, the groups that did the texting, when they have a campaign, they get use of those names. The other thing that we are seeing is we want to engage people. People get excited, they go out and vote, and then what? Well, we got Georgia to turn out and vote. One of the things that I wanted to make sure people in Georgia could do was I wanted to make sure they knew what their state legislature was doing. Most people have no idea what is a federal responsibility from a state responsibility from a city council responsibility. So we've been phone banking into Georgia, and those districts where their state senators and their state representatives are introducing these horrible bills, well, we're calling those voters and we're telling them what their representatives are doing for two reasons. Number one, we want them to see they have a voice and to go and use that voice. And number two, we want them to realize it is important to go all the way down the ballot when they vote, even if potentially you're voting for somebody that you never heard of. Because the guy who's currently got the seat, who's real friendly to you at the county fair and, remembers your name and says hi to your kids, when legislature is in session, he's writing bills and passing bills that are going to make it harder for you and your family to vote. So we are embarking on a civic education campaign. Right now, we're working in Georgia and we're working in Arizona because those are the legislatures that are in session. As other states begin introducing these really bad bills, and until we get HR 1S1, we will go into those states and work on educating people about what's going on in their state house and helping them see that they have a voice and helping them begin to understand this is where your problems are coming from. Everything isn't federal. There are some things that are very local and much easier for you to fix.
So Jan, I think there's some questions in the chat. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Andrea, I'm looking for the questions for you, so you don't have to look.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's some confusion about, I want to tell everyone, Jerry, could you put the Reclaim Our Vote website in the chat so people can contact them so they can help out when they want to, so they'll know how to contact?
Common Ground website and my email address. Yeah.
Okay, put that in. And Andrea, people are confused about how we're going to get this passed in the Senate. They're thinking that we're going to have to get rid of the filibuster by getting 10 more people to get out of the filibuster. But I think you said that we don't have to do that. They want that.
You don't need to do that.
Several questions on that.
That would be one option. The odds of that happening pretty much don't exist. It's going to be hard to find 10 Republicans who believe in expanding voting rights. That's going to be a real tough one. And even if they believe in expanding voting rights, many people, well, Democrats included, elected critters seem to be very squeamish on campaign finance. Now, this may be one of the few times in history that all the Democrats in the House had stood up together and said, we support this. Everybody from the squad to the most conservative Republican, they all signed on to HR 1. One of the options that we have in the Senate is, and this is what happens often when Republicans are in control, is they refer to it sometimes as the nuclear option. You carve out an issue and you say, we're going to use a simple majority to pass these issues. And that's part of the talk, that they may make democracy issues their carve-outs, just as the Republicans made the courts their carve-out. There is also talk that they will be bringing back earmarks, so that if they can't get Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to go along, then they can look at other Republicans that have worked well on other issues. We're working with Republican offices on removing the ratification deadline from the Equal Rights Amendment. So we have a couple of Republican offices that have already signed on, and there are other offices that we are talking with. We are talking about, are the senators going to sit there and protect an arcane custom of the Senate, or are they going to stand up and protect democracy? This is really what the argument will be coming down to. And the fact that we have 165 bills in 33 states should be a very sobering argument that they are going to need to do this. Otherwise, 2022, nobody will be able to vote.
So I have a couple questions. One says, won't the states, if it passes, won't the states challenge and sue? And then the other question I have is, are you saying that we don't need 60 people to make the democracy? We can have like 51 or 53 senators, and we can
Simple majority, 51 passes, yes.
And they can save the
Now,
democracy.
will the states challenge and sue? They might. They are probably going to lose in court.
They lose in the lower court before they go to the Supreme Court, is what you're saying?
Right. And we've got a couple of interesting cases going before the Supreme Court right now. So, yes.
Okay. So anyway, I think I've seen, well, see, the other questions I see here, so they want to know if, for sure, if this HR1 will supersede any state laws. That's correct.
Yes, federal law trumps state law. So if states want to suppress the vote, then one of their options will be to hold state elections at a totally different time than federal elections, because it will be onerous purely from an administrative standpoint to try to administer an election where on the federal side, you've got one set of rules and you have totally different rules on the state side. Now they could say, we're going to go the way that Virginia goes, and we're going to just move our state and local elections to another year. That's incredibly expensive. And again, it's still very complicated administration.
Andrea, won't the 2020, vote by mail evidence of the national election influence just citizens in all of the states that the Republican senators represent, that they would like to have S1?
Yes. Now, again, remember, vote by mail was originally used by older white voters.
Mm-hmm.
And community of color voters, the attitude was, we fought so hard to get in the door. No, we're not mailing the silly thing. We are going in the door. But with the pandemic, people had to think about their health. And it was more, do I want to try to go out and vote, or am I going to try to vote safely? So a lot of people elected to vote safely. Arizona has something called the Permanent Early Voting List, PEVL. Arizona is proposing to dump everybody off the PEVL list that missed 2 federal elections. Well, 2.3 million of Arizona's citizens are over the age of 60. So would it be possible that there was one election, they hated all the candidates and said, I'm just not going to vote, I'm staying home, and another election, they were sick. All of a sudden now, you're going to dump them off the permanent early voting list. And what we normally have seen is the way they notify people, it tends to look like junk mail, and most people throw it away, never realizing that they're throwing away their ability to vote. That is why our postcards are bright and colorful. We have you handwrite them using brightly colored pens so that it doesn't look like mass produced junk mail.
So Lori says, I live in Florida. How can I get, is there a way that I can get active in Florida? It's a mess here, she says.
And
Yes.
Andrew, I did put Laura Sejan's email address in the
Beautiful.
chat just now.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Yes, we do have an organizer in Florida. Her name is Laura Sejan. You can reach out to Laura. And again, not a lot is going through the Florida legislature yet. Things will be. What we're hoping is that we might at some point be able to lift up the really good legislation that is being enacted. But there is so much bad stuff that's coming up to a vote that we've been forced to almost exclusively deal with the bad stuff. Right, yeah, not voting in 2 presidential elections. So 2 presidential elections is 8 years. 2 federal elections is 4 years. So there's a huge difference. Virginia uses 2 federal elections. Normally, Virginia has 279,000 deregistered voters of color. Because we just had a presidential election, Virginia now has 468,000 deregistered voters of color. Virginia has purged her rolls. There's been another presidential election.
Wow. Okay, I don't see other questions.
Right, right. And that is true in California and Virginia. California is not a southern state. In all southern states, including Texas, it's 2 federal elections and you are purged.
I'm opening it up if anyone has questions that I've missed in the chat. Anyone, please speak up.
You know, Barbara, I don't know, I see your hand is raised. Did you have a question? Or was it a mistake that you raised your hand?
Okay, in the chat, I asked that people put their email contacts or other contacts for the Reclaim Our Vote to have your contacts so that when we have future activities, one of our attendees already left and said she wanted to be involved, but we don't know how to contact her. So if you want to be contacted again, we did a lot of publication. So we don't know how you found us. So if you give us your information, we can contact you more easily in the future instead of we might miss you the way you got the
Yes.
information.
And I want to do a shout out to the League of Women Voters, AAUW, for the phenomenal work you have done around the Equal Rights Amendment. I've been back on that fight. I've worked on that for 54 years. I was 12 years old when my mother got me started on that. So I worked to remove the ratification deadline, build up support for that bill. And then I also had an opportunity to work with Nevada, with Illinois, and I made the closing arguments in the Virginia House when Virginia ratified last year.
Okay, any more questions? Wow, this is great.
Maybe you can tell us, Andrea, where the ERA is right now, like what's happening with that?
Well, right now, 38 states have ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. And so technically speaking, the archivist should have entered the Equal Rights Amendment as the 28th Amendment in the United States Constitution. President Trump sued the archivist and told the archivist, don't you dare enter that as the new amendment. So we are looking at three attacks. Number one, we have sued the archivists, the attorney generals of Nevada, Illinois, Virginia, and 120 other states, localities, and corporations have sued the archivists, saying there are 38 states who have properly ratified. We have a new constitutional amendment. We are also prepared to take our fight to the Supreme Court, and simultaneously, we are working with Congress. The bills are already in to remove the ratification deadline. The last time I looked, Jackie Spear had 208 people on the bill that had previously passed in the House in February of 2020. And of course, Senator McConnell refused to bring it to the floor. So we do have Senator Murkowski as initial co-sponsor of the bill. And we are also talking to a number of other Republican offices, especially offices where their state has ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, but the senators have not come out in favor of it. So we are working on that as well, because there are only 2 states where there are less women than men. And the Equal Rights Amendment is a bread and butter financial bill. It is about equal rights, our equal aspirations, and it provides that bedrock case law that says you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex when it comes to pay.
What are those 2 states?
I don't remember. They're both Western states. So they're relatively small states, but they are the only 2 where the population of men is greater than women. All the other 48 states, there are more women than men.
Okay. Suzanne, do you want to talk now, please? Suzanne Anton? You here? Unmute yourself.
My role about promoting AAUW programs.
Yeah, talk about the AAUW a little bit.
Okay, well, for those of you who are new to our program, AAUW was established in 1881, and it has been in the forefront of fighting for equity for women and education since then. Our branch, the Benicia Vallejo branch, was established, I believe it's 42 years ago, by a wonderful woman who's still an active member, Mary Lou Bogart, and we are ably led these days by our president, Janet Leventhal, and several of the other people that are on this call. So we'd be very open to having any of you all who are interested in joining us come. I'm going to copy and paste quickly 2 programs that we have coming up, that we are open programs that we hope that you'll participate in. One will be held March 8th for the International Women's Day, and we're honored to have California's first woman lieutenant governor. Cynthia, please unmute and remind me of her name, because I just don't have it on the tip of my tongue. I'll flip over to my press release and tell you in just a second. Hold on just a second. Her name is Eleni Kunalakis, and she will be opening the program for us. And then we have a panel of women who are active in international management doing that. So we hope that all of you all will come. If you go to our regular website, you will be able to get that, or we'll send out to all of the emails in this message.
What's
Sorry,
the
I'm having,
URL for the website? I'll just put it in the chat for you, Suzanne. Is that okay?
just a second, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay,
Give me a
I'm
minute.
your scribe.
So
This
while
is Susan
Suzanne is
Martin.
doing that, I just want to say if anyone wants to join our local branch during this meeting, you can get free national dues for a year. So if you're interested, it's not too expensive to join right now to our group. And
It's a 56% discount.
yeah,
So it's
so-
worth the effort.
so if you let us know you want to join today to the Vallejo Benicia branch, we'll get that going.
And then we have a second program that's going to be held on March 20th, again, using the voices of local members. And Juanita Martin, who has been on this call, will be in charge of that. And we're going to have people speak to their experiences during the 2020 year. What were the challenges of being COVID protected and isolated from our regular group, and what's happening now for them as 2021 opens up. So both of those programs we think will be really worthwhile, and we hope you'll take advantage of this membership promotion. It's about a 90, I can't, Carolyn, can you tell me what the total dues count is? Carolyn Fallon?
It keeps changing. I think it's a little over $100 now
Yeah.
for
So
the national dues. But
it could mean that if you sign up for about $50, you're gonna get $100 worth of value.
that's
And
right.
we're a real fun rockin' group of advocates who are consistent, just like Andrea. They've been in the trenches fighting for equity for a long time. So we'd be very delighted to have you join us.
We also have lots of other groups that meet, like the book group. We have a book club group, and we have a cooking group. And when we're not having COVID, we get together and have
And
parties.
Tech Trek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about Tech Trek, Marty. You want to talk about Tech Trek? Is Joan here?
I thought I saw her.
Joan, are you here? She's our Tech Trek person. Okay, Tech Trek is our scholarship for seventh graders to go to a special science camp every summer.
I'm
This
here,
summer-
but
Here's
it's
Joan.
okay. Go on.
Joan. So anyway, that's one of our main activities that we do.
We
Sure.
raised scholarship money to send a half a dozen girls from Benicia and Vallejo to a 1-week residential summer camp. And this summer it's a virtual camp, but we hope to resume on campus at Sonoma State University in 2022.
Okay. So that's it, guys. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Andrea,
Welcome,
Andrea,
Heather.
do you have more to say before to say goodbye, Andrea?
Carolyn has something she wants to say.
Yes,
And I also want to thank Andrea because it's wonderful to have you. We are just so happy. Everybody's
Thank
blood.
you for inviting me. This was
We
a
are so happy
lovely
to
way
have
to
you.
spend a Sunday evening.
Carolyn,
you,
what did you want to
Andrea.
say?
yes, I want, don't you think we should mention we have our big poetry? Two of our members are very, very active poets in the community. Aren't we having a poetry get together in March also?
Yeah, that's
Put
what
that in the chat.
that's what Suzanne was talking about. She's
Oh, okay.
talking about
Thank
the poetry,
Thank
poems
you.
about the COVID. Yeah, it's poetry. That's on the 20th. Good.
Again, Andrea,
Okay.
thank you so much for being here. And Nancy also, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Jerry, do you want me to send you my slide deck?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. All right.
So we can people can just be on here to talk if they have anything else they want to say, anything, then we'll
And I'm
we'll
going
close
to
out.
put my email again in the chat. If people want to know more about Reclaim Our Vote, sign up for future actions with Reclaim Our Vote Center for Common Ground, please contact me.
And I do want to say hi to Nadine, my stepmom. So
Is Nadine
Where is-
here?
I have to
Nadine
Yes.
is here.
Oh, great.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi, Nadine. Long time no see.
Yeah,
Hi, Nadine.
thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, yes, Jerry.
Andrea, this was fabulous. And I do have a question for Ms. Goodban, not
Which
Nadine, your daughter, your
Nancy.
stepdaughter. What do you do related to this at California level? Because Andrea's the whole country. Are you doing ROV? Reclaim Our
Yeah,
Vote?
right. So I live in Redwood City.
Uh-huh.
So we have a group in, like Jerry does in Solano County, we have a group in San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and Santa Cruz County. So.
And Nancy is part of my national team.
Mhm. I work pretty
This is
closely with Andrea
really,
because there's always a
really-
lot going on with figuring out what to do with postcards and phone banks and so forth. So we stay in pretty close touch, just trying to help. I just try to help her out.
You know, Nancy's being very modest.
Yes, yes, very, very modest.
I wanted to give her a
Right.
commercial.
Does so much. She's so, really all the content,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, what we do a presentation every Thursday night, and Nancy provides the notes. Her son edits our videos, and then often Thursday night, never later than Friday, everybody who was signed up for that event, they're going to get the notes. Here's the video. This is all the stuff you need to do. This is how you can volunteer. I mean, every week.
So
And
that's,
then she plans the webinar. She's on the planning team.
so that's what's ongoing right now after the election. Every Thursday night, you're still planning things and deciding
Yes.
what to do next.
Yes, we have 2 new series that we launched. Some of you may have been aware of our summit series, Voting in Troubled Times. Well, now we have the Accelerating Justice series, where we are looking at achieving racial equity in the criminal justice system. And so we started with Blue Ribbon Report commissioned by the governor of North Carolina. So we're talking about legislatively, how will we accomplish it? What would law enforcement need to change? What would the courts need to change? What does the community need to do? And then last Thursday, we launched a new series, Southern Voices, where we're bringing our in-state partners in to do that little reality dose of this is what we are dealing with in the southern states. So while we are fighting voter suppression with one hand, we are also battling ding, 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 ding. So, we're kind of trying to help solve the rural broadband issue, because even in the Deep South, people have to register for their COVID vaccinations online. Well, what do you do when there is no online? So
Right.
we are actually going to be sending big mobile hotspots in so that we can help people get registered. So again, we never saw this as this was going to be a big community issue, but because it is, we're trying to at least come up with a Band-Aid where people can see that there are folks who are aware of the problem and we are willing to try to help.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful, because I think that's one of the big problems. I'm a retired doctor, and all the people that are getting the shots here in California are people like me, or people that have the internet, people that know when to jump in, and they told me they'd send me an invitation on my internet when I became qualified, but I actually didn't get an invitation. I had to figure it out myself, and it's hard.
Right.
So it's hard for me as a retired doctor with connections to get a vaccination over 65. You know, the mobile, that's a really good idea. They need to do that everywhere. Thank you.
Right.
Janet,
Yes?
do we have the website up here somewhere on the chat? Because people are saying they want the links for the programs that we just mentioned.
I just sent the Zoom link in the chat, Janet, and Juanita, and I'll put up the website as well. Just a minute.
Okay, I'm not
Okay.
sure which, we're talking about the ROV. Solano County. Which one are we, did you just send?
No, the website, our website, Benicia Vallejo, and
Okay.
then the links for the poetry event and the March 8th event.
Thanks, Juanita.
Both of those Zoom links are in the chat
Great.
under my name.
Okay. Okay, so you're sending it to everybody though, right?
It's in the
Suzanne?
chat, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you
Okay.
should do it again, just to.
Yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see it
Okay.
either.
Okay. Okay.
There was a woman on that said she wanted to join, but I didn't see any email for her. I don't know if she's still on. Her name is Kathy Faustinas.
Ah. Okay, I'll look for her.
But she didn't provide an email. There was another woman who said she wanted to join, that's on the chat, and her email is there.
Great.
Heather.
Thanks, Juanita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll review the chat. I'll have a recording and we'll review it all later. That's wonderful.
Well,
Do we have,
and you all know how to save the chat, right? In chat, the little 3 buttons off to the right of the word file. When you click the more button, save chat is your first menu item.
Great.
I have a question. Do we have contact information for Andrea Miller?
Andrea, do you have specific contact information that we don't have on here yet? That Juanita's asking.
I just stuck it in the chat. Andrea at Center for Common Ground.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what Suzanne was saying was that we're having a poetry reading on the 20th and talking about what it was like to get over COVID quarantine. And that's poetry. And Juanita, who's been just speaking, is the person who's going to moderate that.
Is that,
I want to say hi. What?
is that commonground.org or .com?
We're .org. Yes.
.org. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
I want to say hi to my son and daughter-in-law, Jonathan and Heather. Hello there. It's good to see you.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so what else do we have to talk about? We can just talk, or other people must have questions for Andrea. She's not going anywhere. It's really nice.
Yes, it is nice.
We're
Very
loving
nice.
it. Andrea, do you talk to Stacy Abrams? Are you like connected?
No,
No,
not at all.
really? That's interesting.
Nope. Mm-mm. Nope.
Women's Day celebration.
I'm very, very grassroots. We work with very, very small organizations. So we also work and help some of the small organizations, again, with various types of resources. And again, she's in Atlanta. We are in not Atlanta.
Ah, that's okay.
The rest of Georgia.
Okay.
Right. Like we sometimes tell people Virginia is still 2 states. You have Nova, Northern Virginia, and then you have Rova, the rest of Virginia.
Oh, my God.
Wow. Do you work in both Rova and outside of Atlanta? You do it all.
Yes, again, our sweet spot is, where is the black belt in a state? So normally it's going to be rural. I live in what was rural Virginia. So yes.
And so my impression is that when we send a postcard to people in the black belt, they're actually happy to get them. as opposed
Well,
going
they
down?
haven't gotten anything from anybody, and it's kind of like Horton Hears a Who. People get kind of excited that somebody actually knows they're there and cares.
Wow.
Yeah. So when we postcard the urban areas, like I said in Georgia, there are 30 groups in addition to the Democratic Party that are in the city of Atlanta. When you get out into the Black Belt, those counties don't have a Democratic Party. They don't have an indivisible. They don't have anything.
Wow.
So we're there.
So even a voicemail is a good thing.
Yes.
I was intrigued by your comment because everything I did for this last election, I was told, don't do that. I got a lot of hangups. So it wasn't.
Well, it's different when you are giving voters information to empower them versus trying to sell a candidate. There's a world of difference.
But I was also telling them where to, at one point, where to go to vote. Where was early voting? When had it started? What was the address? I mean, people were talking to me like I was their neighbor. Oh, that's down the road, you know.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I mean, you are going to get some hangups. We can't promise people zero hangups, but our hangup percentage is normally 2 to 3%, whereas the average refuse percentage is above 10.
Wow. Wow.
So some of
I
the
want to be on your
states,
team.
like North Carolina or the South Carolina, has a lot of Hispanics that probably aren't voting. Are you targeting them at all? You are, right?
It depends. If we have people who speak Spanish, if they're older voters, we need a lot of people to speak Spanish. If they're younger voters, they speak English. So it really depends on the age of the voter. So we sometimes segment our phone banks by age. And when we were working in Texas, I had a team of native Spanish speakers that were calling Texas.
Mhm.
Because there's a very specific dialect that you want to use in Texas. And they could speak with that dialect. That was their dialect.
So you're not just talking the language, you're also talking the style of speaking.
We are being respectful of culture.
Right.
So when we are in the Deep South, it is yes, sir, and it is yes, ma'am, because that's the Deep South. Virginia is not the Deep South. We're Maryland with an attitude.
Maryland with an attitude. I like that one. Okay. Wow.
Well, like I said, we had a good legislative session. We legalized marijuana. Not only did we legalize it, we said anybody that went to jail for simple possession, we're letting them out. We're expunging their record because we're taxing it. The money that we get from the marijuana tax will be used to help heal the communities harmed by the war on drugs. And we declared racism a public health issue.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is Virginia. Now, in
Wow.
2015, Virginia looked a lot like Georgia. We had 47 House seats out of 100 where no Democrat even bothered to run for that seat.
Oh my God.
In 2017, we lost tying for control of the House of Delegates by one vote.
Wow.
That is how far Virginia came. And in 2019, we took the Virginia Senate and the Virginia House. And the first bill we passed, or one of the first, was Virginia ratified the Equal Rights Amendment.
Wow.
And the woman who put that bill in, well, there was one woman who put it in the Senate, one woman who put it in the House. So Virginia in 2021 has 2 Black women, both named Jennifer, running for governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wow. Wow,
That's
that's
great.
interesting.
Congratulations, Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yeah.
Really,
And now
That's
for
amazing.
lieutenant governor, we have a Muslim man, the man who introduced the Virginia Green New Deal. We have 2 Hispanic women, an African American man, and those are the only ones that I can think of. And
Wow.
that is the top of our ticket.
Wow, that's impressive.
We've come a long way, baby.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now
Wow.
Central Virginia, ROVA, is actually more progressive in terms of campaign finance than Northern Virginia. And we're going to have to replace some of these Northern Virginia people who are in the pockets of corporations, because it was the Northern Virginia people who defeated all of our campaign finance legislation.
Do you think there's a chance of Citizens United to get overturned? In my lifetime, I'm 67.
Oh, you and I are the same age. Anything is possible. I mean, look at Virginia. Anything is possible. 5 years ago, people would have said, you're going to waste your time and go work in Virginia. We had a bunch of young candidates where they decided they didn't have any money, but they signed a pledge. We will not take money from Dominion Energy. There were 30 of them that signed a pledge. 14 of them got elected.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
And then in 2019, we went back and elected 5 more of them.
Very impressive.
Yeah. Yep.
Politics is so complicated.
Yes.
Elections are complicated. I mean,
Elections are complicated, and most importantly, elections matter.
Yeah. This was really a great program, Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So
Very
again,
nice.
if we
Thank
want
Jerry
$50 an hour, there are some people on both sides that we're going to need to get rid of, because they are more interested in supporting what corporations want than what the people want. So it's going to get interesting. That's why I enjoy working in a nonpartisan fashion, because I personally am neither a Democrat nor am I a Republican. I'm absolutely nothing.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah.
I want to thank Jerry Kahn, our member, for doing all the organizing to make this program happen too, and for her leadership within the county. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. Yes. And all of you for all the work that you do in AAUW, in League of Women Voters, working with Reclaim Our Vote. Thank you. It is your dedication that is making these little engines move, where we, the people, and not the political parties, are really starting to have a major effort.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And yes, thank you, Jerry and Andrea, for being here for us. Very inspiring.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Andrea, will you come again next year?
Oh, yes, yes. I will
Good.
come whenever you invite me. Now, I put in the chat a long time ago. I used to live in the East Bay. I still own the condo in Albany at Albany Hill.
Great investment.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Smart. Keep that real estate.
Yeah. We bought it in 1971 when we got married.
Oh my
Good.
God. Oh my
Hey.
gosh. That's a great location.
Yep.
Is it in the
Yep,
city
yep,
of
yep.
Albany? Is it in the city limits?
It's Albany Hill, so
Right.
it's those high rises right off 580.
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of at a diagonal from the racetrack.
Yeah,
yeah.
we all know it. We all know it.
Yeah,
Just can't
yeah,
go.
yeah. Everybody, if you've been on 580, you've driven past those. The buildings used to be green, a light yellow, and a soft blue. Gateway at Albany Hill. Yep.
Okay, well, hope to see everybody on March 8th for International Women's Day.
All right, thanks,
Right.
Suzanne.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Bye, Nancy. Bye, Andrea. Thank
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye,
Andrea.
thank you.
See you next
to see
So
you.
time.
Jerry, thank you for doing this. Bye, Nadine.
you.
Bye, Andrea.
Bye, Nancy. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this.
So the people who are talked, let's stay on for a little while. The people who are involved, we just
Bye.
talk over.
Bye,
And
Jean. Bye,
see if
Jean.
we have anything else we want to say. Hi, Elizabeth, you're still here.
She's probably taking her puppy outside.
Oh.
Hi, Chris, it's good to see you.